Everybody, welcome back to another episode of whatever the hell I'm doing here. I'm Samson Folk. I do podcasts at Raptors Republic, and we are in the throes of draft season, which obviously means that we're talking about draft prospects. Who better to talk about draft prospects with than the resident draft expert at Raptors Republic? It's been years that he's been doing profiles on a number of prospects across, I guess, like 4 drafts now? Was 2021 the first year that you started writing the write-ups?
Um, I think it must have been
Yeah. I think
2021 or 2020.
4 or
Uh,
5 years,
4 or 5
basically.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think 7 write-ups currently on raptorsrepublic.com that you can go and read. You will need a subscription, but we're here to deliver it to you via audio. We're going to vocalize what has been written. Brendan Stewart, how you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic. Weather just finally got good out at my neck of the woods for the summer, so getting ready to get into the summer spirit here,
And
especially with the draft around the corner. So
yeah, it was June 21st, just yesterday, so that means that summer's officially started, I
mhm.
suppose. And yeah, I've the weather's been like crazy hot in Toronto.
I've heard that. Yeah, that it's just been you guys are in the middle of a heat wave or something out there.
Yeah,
I'm in BC. We've had a bit more rain to start the summer, but
that's good.
yeah.
I feel like I maybe
it's
not.
it's a good thing just so we kind of avoid the start of fire season
Yes,
this year compared to last year. But
you have to quell the wants of the deep bush to like engulf in flames. Yeah,
oh yeah,
let's talk about somebody who engulfs in flames from the big man position from downtown. This is the guy I want to talk to you most about, actually, DaRon Holmes, because you had a tweet saying like this is the big man the Raptors fans should actually want, because Khalil Ware has received a lot of fanfare, and I like Khalil, but I actually do think I agree with you in that I think DaRon is probably a better prospect. So let's start with DaRon. What is the opening pitch? What's the elevator pitch?
the elevator pitch is kind of a similar pitch that I have with a lot of prospects that I like, and that's multi-skilled. And I think DaRon is someone who can shoot. He has a shot around 38-39% from his last 2 years at Dayton, around 2.5 attempts per game. So, he's not lighting it up, but he's someone who's capable. Playmaking. He's someone who averaged about 2.5 assists, I think, the last 2 years in that range. A positive assist turnover ratio. He's someone who keeps the ball moving. If he doesn't have a shot, he's more than willing to pass it out and see if he can get another look. Defense. Very switchable on the perimeter. Very good rim protector. His fouls are low. In about 32, 33 minutes per game, he only averages about 2 fouls. And for somebody who's that involved on the defensive end, especially at the college level, I think that's something that is important for him when translating his game to the NBA. And he's someone who is going to be able to stay in the game in late game situations. Only around 71, 72% from the free throw line. But he's somebody who, he's not going to burn you if he
Hmm.
gets to the line. And he does draw a lot. I think I wrote he's like third in the nation in getting to the line. I just want to make sure I have that right.
While you look this up, I'll just say for the listener, so his per game averages this past season in Dayton, 32 minutes per game, 20 points per game, 2 blocks a game, 2.5 assists per game, 8.5 rebounds, and 54% from the field, 38% from three, almost 39%, 71% from the line. And so the quick thing too is that the biggest identifier of who's going to be able to shoot at the next level typically isn't percentage, because I know Khalil was, I think, around 41%, just as the comparison point. But DaRon this season took twice as many threes as Khalil did. You start parsing between volume and percentage, I think it comes out very positively. So those are the numbers that stay wrong. But go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. I think when looking at percentages are obviously important, but I think there's something to be said about DaRon taking almost twice the amount of shots compared to Khalil. And yeah, what I was looking up before is getting to the line. He gets to the line more than any other player in D1 besides Tulsa's PJ Haggerty and Purdue's Zach Edey. And Zach Edey, as we know, is basically a guarantee to get to the line multiple times per game just due to his sheer presence. So
Mhm.
DaRon being a 6'10 big, getting to the line as much as he does, I think speaks to his foul drawing capabilities, which is, I think, important.
Yeah. And so there's a few things that pop out to me immediately in the cell. Firstly, I think good rim protector. I also saw that in the film. But when I read your piece, like obviously you're clipping things. If anybody wants to go read, it's laid out quite nicely. But what are your expectations about, as you said, he's switchable. He can play a lot of different schemes as far as like playing at the point of attack or screen navigation, guarding primary actions. But at 6'10, 2 blocks per game at the college level, do you think that he can be a primary guy at the NBA level, or do you expect him mostly to be a guy who is like a secondary rim protector, who's the low man who steps in and makes like backline rotations, or can he be a guy who's like sitting in the middle of it all, gumming it up?
The great thing about him is I think he has the ability to be both. And I think he has the potential to fit next to multiple bigs. I know some people have expressed concern with his size, saying he's more suited to be a
Sure.
four. But the great thing about him is that, again, yeah, I could see him sliding into a four, playing next to someone like a Jakob Pertl, who would be your primary line of defense, and he can maybe, yeah, again, be that secondary defender, or he can be your primary big off the bench, and he's your uh, primary defender in that sense. I think his instincts and his overall intelligence when it comes to protecting the rim is something that can't really be overstated. He's always looking around, waiting for the weak side block. He's very good at his using his verticality. I think there's very few situations where he's been caught off guard, which is something that's already impressive coming into the NBA. Just shows how aware he is. And when you have him, say, playing next to a better rim protector in the NBA, that's just kind of taking a load off his shoulders so that he can focus on maybe some more minute details. That's where my head is at. I think that it's, he's not going to be averaging 2 blocks and the minimal amount of fouls right away just because of the size difference, the pace difference. I think there is going to be an adjustment period there. But I think with what he's shown in his time at Dayton is that he has that capability to be a defender, whether that be, like I said, primary off the bench, playing with another Kelly Olynyk, Jakob Pertl. I think that would actually be beneficial for him if there's a better rim protector beside him, and then he can kind of grow into that more primary role as he gets more comfortable.
Okay, so if he is playing the four, and that's the
Yeah.
role that I love bigs that can go 4 and 5. Like that really helps things out. And we saw this past season, Kelly Olynyk is probably more comfortable just in one spot rather than the other. He used to be able, there was a couple seasons where he could do both, but DaRon, I guess we're hoping he can do both. The offensive fit I think is pretty intuitive, but defensively to play the four, I think you have to be able to step out on a lot of switches. I think you have to be able to play more aggressive coverages. What is your expectation for him coming into the NBA and being able to play like at the level of the screen, making guys take negative dribbles or even switching out?
I think he's very good at creating pressure when you ask him to come out. There were a few plays I saw where he has very active hands, like when he's navigating screens and the dribbler comes around the top. He's already getting around the screen. He's already reaching his hand out, and he's very careful. He's very particular about not creating that contact and making mistakes coming off the screen. So when he's asked to come out to the perimeter, I think he's very reliable. Um, and I think it's good for the scheme that they're trying to create. I mentioned in that piece that if there's still that sense of that Vision 6-9 that they were looking at the last couple of years and having that long switchable lineup, that DaRon should fit into that quite well. And I think it's, like you said, intuitive because if he's playing the 4 or the 5, he can still come out, he can go back in, just having that versatility on defense is, I think, important, and where I would value him over some of the more traditional just rim protecting bigs, like we mentioned, Missy and Ware. But and yeah, that's where I'm at with him defensively. I think it's the fit is pretty good. You mentioned the offensive fit as well, which is like yeah, the playmaking, the spacing, everything that kind of fits into this Darko ball vision that we're kind of gravitating towards. And yeah, the fit is just one of my favorite fits in the class anyway.
I think when I'm watching him on offense, I see a lot of potential for keepers. I see a lot of potential for paint touches for him based on a lot of the primary actions that the Raptors are running through. However, I kind of want to get an understanding of how you find his playmaking, because the Raptors, they play make a lot from the elbows or even higher than that. They get their bigs to catch there. They run a lot of off-ball actions. And what have you made about him making reads from like a stagnant position like that? And then also as a short roll big man, what have you thought about his playmaking on the move?
I think he's been good in both regards. I know Dayton used him in the pick and roll pretty often. Um, he's there's been a critique that he needs to cut down on his turnovers. I agree. When you have only about 2.6 assists and 2.2 turnovers, so it's you're almost at that 50-50 stage. I think that his best playmaking is when it is stationary and he just needs to keep the ball moving. He has a lot of really good like over the head passes. Um, he has some pretty like great aim on most of the film that I've watched. Just getting it to his teammates. I think it just needs to come down to discipline and just kind of improving what type of passes to make where. Like sometimes he'll get some bounce passes picked off when he should have just gone for a straight pass. With in like I mean, when you're at this point in the draft, I think if you're looking for a big who has that playmaking ability, you're looking at him and Filipowski, and I would feel more comfortable with DaRon over Filipowski just on the film that I've watched. I think that DaRon's a little more aware and makes some smarter decisions, even with that turnover concern. But he's in a position where if you put him on the court with someone like Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickly, those guys, and you need to keep the ball moving, he's someone where it's not going to stick. If you have any kind of scheme that involves passing it around the whole court, he'll make sure that it gets to the next guy. He makes sure that if he doesn't have a shot, he keeps the ball moving. He passes back out so you can reset. And even like moving off the ball, waiting for the pass. He's one of the bigs that's very, very good at that. I know when we talked last year about Grady Dick, we made a point to talk about his off-ball movement a lot. And I think that DaRon is in that kind of same thing where you can rely on him to move off ball. You can rely on him to cut. And in that sense, he's making plays in that way, keeping the offense open, keeping it moving.
Let's talk about that scoring punch then, because everybody wants a little scoring punch here and there. When we think about him, obviously off ball movement is really important for bigs. We're talking about the semicircle cut to the front of the rim, hanging out in the dunker spot, making cuts from like the hash mark to get near places. Precious was really good at the 45 cut from the big position, but most bigs aren't typically making those. You said he's often used in the pick and roll. Raptors fans, I think Jakob Pertl is an underrated pick and roll finisher and roller, but to quell some, I guess, fan casting that happens, a lot of Raptors fans want to see Scotty play with like a really vaunted roll man who not only finishes, but finishes going vertical, like lob threats. What do you make about DaRon's ability to like get up and get after it as far as playing with that style?
I think he's got it. Like, it's not the primary scheme they used for him at Dayton, but if you want him to be a roll man who can get up and catch passes and get up for dunks, I think he's capable of that. I think that if you're wanting somebody to be that's all they do, I would probably direct you towards Yves Missi instead.
Yeah.
But with DaRon, where he can provide that, he can also provide the benefit of shooting, even if he's not as good at being a roll man. And I still think he's pretty good at doing that. And like his post up is pretty solid. Not the most advanced footwork by any means, but if you go to him in the paint, he's a pretty reliable option. That's the best I can to describe
Sure.
his offense in the paint. Just pretty reliable. It's nothing spectacular. It's not bad either. But yeah, I think that using him as a roll man, going back to that, he's I've been very impressed with his screening in general. That's another point where it's like he doesn't foul very much. He's very sturdy in setting his feet. He's not somebody who lets contact get to him and set those weak screens that just draw offensive fouls. And that's something that I think is important when you're playing in a scheme that involves Scotty Barnes rolling and all that off-ball movement. You need to have your solid screeners, and I think DaRon would fit effortlessly there.
I think also what I wonder about taking it to the next level, the NBA level, is that as we talked a little bit at the start, putting the ball on the floor, he can attack in straight lines and oftentimes can get that step on bigs who are playing him a little bit high, especially in those screening actions. Do you think that those like straight line dribble drives are going to be available against it is a bigger floor in the NBA, but also there's bigger players waiting at the rim for him when he wants to take it all the way there. Do you think that that dribble drive aspect of his game will still be present in the NBA?
Yeah, I think so. It's something where he's going to need to work on it. I think if you're looking at the things that he needs to work on the most, it would be getting that dribble drive set up. He's capable of doing, a couple dribbles in. He doesn't really have any advanced handle or anything like that. Like he's not on the level of, say, Filipowski when it comes to bigs who can handle at this point in the draft. But again, it's another spot where he's adequate and something that I would expect to be a focus going forward, considering he's already got the foundations for shooting and passing. That way you can just focus kind of on minor tweaks there where he can steadily improve. And I think the big focus for him will be the handle, refining himself as a post player, but using those drives. If there's an open lane, he can take those. Like it's not like a big who gets the ball and has no idea what to do with it if he's more than 10 feet out. DaRon is pretty capable there, and I would be excited seeing how if Toronto gets more floor spacing and just spreading their offense out a bit more, how DaRon would fit in if they decide to run sets with him like that.
Okay, let's hammer before we move on to the next prospect. Let's hammer down the shooting. You just talked about if Toronto gets more spacing, what that looks like. DaRon shoots the ball well at the collegiate level. He has more volume than a lot of other bigs that we're looking at around, well, just in this class in general. But also, the big question with any big man is will they shoot it at the NBA level? Yes, but not just percentage wise. Because if a guy takes 1.4 3-point attempts per game and shoots 37%, that looks good and people can say, oh, yeah, he's hitting them. But defenses don't account for that. And it makes very little difference as far as like what we're seeing as far as a defensive response. Do you think DaRon will shoot enough threes to create a defensive response often? And I think like it's like 10% of bigs who shoot threes actually can like engender that response. Do you think he can get there?
To a point where teams are coming out to cover him like a Miles Turner
Long
or
closeouts, yeah. Not the
long
short
closeout.
closeouts.
It's tough because again, 2.5 threes a game on close to 40%, I think is enough to keep teams to a point where they'll respect his shot.
Sure.
I don't know if he'll get to the point where they're coming out like 5 out long closeouts like
Yeah.
that. That remains to be seen. I like his ability to get there just based on where he is now. And I think that if you're looking at a big who you would expect to get to that point, I think DaRon's as good a bet as any, just on where he is currently coming in. And you're going to have to be comfortable with that at this point in the draft. But yeah, looking at spacing, I think is going to be him and Ware and Filipowski, and I think Holmes is the best bet there
Yeah.
for sure.
Okay. We'll move on to another guy. Isaiah Collier, 6'3", almost 6'4", 6'4". That's like a crazy accent thing, 6'4". Uh, Out of USC, 19 years old. Here's the stats for everybody: 27 games played, 30 minutes per game, 16.3 points per game, 4.3 assists per game, 3 boards a game, 49% from the field, 34% from three, 67% from the free throw line. Now, got to the free throw line quite often. After he was injured part of this season, once he came back, he had a very strong impact on USC's ability to win. He was a very impactful player in that sense. There are questions about a little bit of efficiency. There's questions about the shooting, but I think he is by and large considered one of the best advantage creators in this class. And as the rumors keep suggesting that he's falling down draft boards, maybe there's an opportunity for a Raptors team that can grab one of the most explosive players in the draft. What are your thoughts on Collier?
I would agree with you. I think that he is one of the better advantage creators in the draft. I think he's one of the best offensive generators in general, just due to his ability to create rim pressure, even at his smaller stature. Um,
Isn't
you
it crazy
mentioned,
that like he's almost 6'4", and
yeah,
that's small now?
yeah, it's wild how big the game is getting, and like I still see that as a concern that people are raising with him. And I think it's like when you're in that 6'3", 6'4" range, I think you're about the average size of a point guard anyway. So that's
I
not
guess
really,
the 6'5" wingspan maybe is what people pay
yeah,
attention to a little bit, but yeah, I remember when a 6'4" guard was like a big guard. John Wall was huge when he came in, and he was like 6'4", but not
yeah.
anymore.
It's we're trending that direction.
Hmm.
You mentioned getting to the free throw line, and he did. He got attempted at just about 6 free throw attempts per game. Didn't convert them at a very high level, only 67%, and I think that's kind of ties into the overall concern with Collier, and that's his shooting. You look at his free throw percentage, his 3 point percentage. We mentioned before how percentages aren't everything. You got to look at
Hmm.
volume. 3 point percentage or 3 point volume was only about 3 attempts per game, but still, like you mentioned, only about 34%. I think his form is pretty ugly based on the film that I've watched. He's got kind of a, I wrote about it. It was like a push, yeah, low elevation push release. His guiding hand is limp. It's not a very confident shot, and you kind of see that when watching him too. If he's taking a jump shot, it's usually either a heat check or a last resort for him. And because he loves to get inside and generate rim pressure, and that's his game. But I do think the concerns about his shot are warranted. I think it's a big reason why he's been falling down draft boards, and it's something that teams are definitely paying attention to because when you have a point, you want your point guard to shoot in the NBA. It's just the way the game's going now, and if your point guard can't shoot, man, you better hope they're Magic Johnson, Ben
Hmm.
Simmons level of physical stature, and he's not. So that's something that's going to be a major focus for him if he wants to stick around.
What do you make of that on a Raptors team that presumably will have Emmanuel quickly? Guy like me is hoping that somehow it turns into Darius Garland. But as far as like having a role at an NBA level, not shooting the three, are your expectations that he can come in and be good enough to start stealing reps? Or do you think a bad team needs to get Collier so that they can say, you get this many possessions of pick and roll to like get the angle, get into the lane, cause a ruckus? How do you think he fits into a Raptors offense that has a little bit more pick and roll, but is lower on the lower end overall and requires its guards to play off the ball, to make cuts, to screen? How does he fit in there?
First off, let me say I'm with you on Darius Garland. I think that would be awesome to have him on our team. But I want to look at Collier in particular, and we mentioned like between getting him on a bad team and getting him on a good team, something like that. I think it's important for him to go to a team with established guard play, because any team that throws him into a starting role or a featured role, I think he's going to struggle. And that's where like I think the fit with the Raptors isn't that bad when you look at his non-shooting, because one, they have a hole at the backup point that they've
Mhm.
had for a while, and I think that when you have him coming in shorter bursts, I think he can be an effective player as a rookie. That lack of shooting is going to hurt you, but if you're a bad team and you're looking at rebuilding anyway, I think you're not really caring about that at this point. But I like his fit just from a positional perspective, and the Raptors. I don't want to say they don't have anybody who's capable of generating rim pressure, because they definitely do now. Even though in the last couple of years that's been an area where they've struggled.
Mhm.
So kind of getting more players who are capable of doing that, I think would be useful. And yeah, the fit isn't the cleanest. I think if you're looking at a point guard in general at this point, I think like Jared McCain or Devin Carter would be probably be the cleaner fits. I know Bub Carrington is a popular name too. I think the fit would be interesting there as well. But Collier's, yeah, he's going to be, it's going to be a struggle for him. But I think that the fit isn't terrible. It just isn't the best either.
I think that kind of speaks to how these guards are viewed. I don't think McCain and Carter are viewed with this massive upside. I think they're viewed as like these guys will play. The fit is pretty intuitive, not just with the Raptors, but quite a few teams around the league. And Collier is like, you're like, it might be a little funky, but you see that upside on the other end of it. Like, if he does shoot, this is a guy who's getting 2 feet in the paint all the time. What does that look like 3 or 4 years from now? That's that's what you wonder about. As far as playing on the Raptors, though, the Raptors are weak at the point of attack, guarding guards. Collier, like we talked about, Dem Carter would probably be pretty good sliding into that position as a guy who can guard guards going forward. That would fit well on the Raptors. Jared McCain, I guess, remains to be seen. But Collier, what do you think about his ability to guard his position?
I think that it's solid, and I think that it's good when he's engaged. And the problem with him is that he's not always engaged. The effort for him on defense is going to be interesting to watch going forward, because I think that if he's again not engaged, then what are you doing with him out there? He's going to need to provide value at some point when he's not doesn't have the ball in his hands driving to the rim, and so he's going to need to get that intensity up, or else he is gonna get cooked. And I think that's we saw that a few times at USC, where um, sometimes if the game wasn't going his way, he would just shut down defensively. At least that's what I've noticed in the couple games that I watched of him. And then yeah, USC would really hurt when he wasn't able to defend his position. In terms of just defending in general, I think it's not going to be a problem for him. I know we mentioned the wingspan's a bit shorter. He's no Devin Carter in that department, but he's somebody who, if he gives a damn, he's not going to be, um, a liability out there. The only question is if he can give a damn for 48 minutes.
Before we move on to Missy, is there anything that you think bears saying about Collier?
I think that he was this guy who was seen as this top five name kind of in
Hmm.
the pre-draft process before the college season started, and he kind of gradually fell from there. But he's kind of kept this reputation of being this massive ceiling player, and I think he is. I think his ceiling is pretty high if he can get that issues with his shot figured out. If he can become more engaged defensively, then sky's the limit. You could see a couple all-star games in his future if he gets to that point. But what I want to stress is that because of that pre-draft hype, I think he's kind of dodged the moniker of being a prospect, or sorry, being a project. And I just want to stress that he is a project, and it's going to be a few years before you see him kind of start to come into his own if he does. And the team that takes him is going to want to focus on that shot so that he can realize his potential.
Start to play around with it, create more angles out of the pick and roll,
Mm-hmm.
allow the bursts to eat a little bit more. Yeah, a bursty guy.
Very
And
bursty.
oh, yeah, and another bursty guy we'll talk about right now. You mentioned that perhaps if the Raptors want that run and dunk presence, that lob catching presence in the draft, perhaps a better place to go. Yes, Collier Ware, but Missi, 7 foot big out of Baylor, 20 years old, 34 games, 36 minutes per game this season, 16.8 points per game, 8.8 rebounds per game, 2.4 blocks, almost a steal. Um, like 3 times as many turnovers as he had assists, 61% from the free throw line, a lot of volume there. Didn't take a single three, 61% from the field. This is just like getting after it type of player. Missi, what's the sales pitch?
Your sales pitch is: do you like Clint Capella? Because that's the role he's going to be playing. That's the where a lot of the similarities come in, and one-to-one player comparisons are never great, but that's the closest I can think of in terms of what his role is going to be. You know, he's going to be somebody who defends the rim, plays the screener, dives to the basket. His scoring is going to come at or within 5 feet of the rim.
Yep.
It's not a player who I would expect to be a shooter at any point. I just don't see that as a reasonable development for him. You mentioned the playmaking and how he has three times more turnovers than he has assists. I think that's a little worrisome too. But and yeah, I made a note of that where if he gets the ball, your possession is ending. It's going to be a shot attempt or a turnover. He's just not one who is willing to give it up once he has it. But once he has it, you're like I said, the play is usually to send him up for a lob or in the post. So that's his role. I think he's not someone who I would personally target at 19. I get the appeal just from being an athletic rim runner, and I do love those types of players. I mentioned in my article that I had, Jalen Duren as a top 5 prospect a couple of years ago.
He's a slick passer though.
He is.
Jalen is a cool player. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and that's why I had him top 5, because he has those ancillary skills, that secondary skill set where you can see him expanding his game. I don't really see that with Missi. I think that he's very much what you see is what you get player. Now, can he get better? Yes, but I think it's going to be expanding on what he's already established, refining the details of his games that he's good at, like defending the rim, like being a short roll big and getting into the paint for post ups, dunks, lobs, whatever you want him to do. But it's a tough sell when you're at the 19th pick and you're in a draft like this, looking at players with more varied skill sets. I think is something that makes a bit more sense for Toronto.
Well,
If they had, yeah,
31, are you like, oh yeah, grab him quick?
At 31, I wouldn't have a problem with it, just because you're getting. I think it's all about value, and I think when you get to 31, you're going to have a couple first round guys that maybe fall out, or you're going to have those fringe first rounders. I think Missi is in that fringe first rounder category, and if you think that, yeah, we need that athletic big presence, just for we need to fill out that role on our team, then I think Missi makes the most sense for that. Where I would push against that at 19 is that I just think there's going to be better value at that pick, which is why I've kind of been against Missi from the jump. I just like players with multifaceted skills who are capable of doing a lot of things, fitting into a lot of different schemes. Missi, I think, isn't that, but if you want to take a flyer on him at 31, go right ahead.
I think it's, from what I saw, as you mentioned, it's that classic archetype. Clint Capella is probably very emblematic of what we've seen, that role, that archetype. He's the name everyone thinks of because he didn't make an All-Star game, but he was impactful and he offered, I think, a lot of value. And he was like 22nd overall pick or something like that, I think. Anyway, the thing that I wonder about with Missi on the Raptors is that the Raptors do not typically, And Darko's the coach. We've seen what it looks like. They aren't typically just asking for running and dunking from their bigs. They want a significant amount of interplay, unique, nuanced interplay between bigs and guards. They want their bigs to be able to make these high-low reads. They want their bigs to confidently and competently dribble above the break to connect actions. And they want their bigs to have like no loading, no buffering time, quick decisions. And that's where I'm wondering, like, it's the problem a lot of people had watching Precious try and fit into, and Missy and Precious aren't, that's not a comparison point, but that's where Precious had a lot of trouble fitting in because Precious didn't really make sense in that exact role. And once he went to the New York Knicks, who were asking for more intuitive, like cut when your star collapses the defense, make yourself available in the dunker spot. Missy, in the same way, I think, is like a more intuitive big like that. The Raptors don't play their bigs that way. They don't require creation necessarily, but they require hubbiness, whatever that term is. And that's what I wonder about Missy. Offensively, I think that the fit is tough. And of course, bigs, sometimes they can develop that playmaking out of nowhere. In my anecdotally going back into my brain, I think typically it comes around between like 27 and 31 years old is when bigs start to, if they are developing that playmaking, they start seeing the game after like, this is my third contract. I've seen the way guys play defense. Defensively, though, Missy, that's a big sell there. He's supposed to be able to like sit and drop, break up lobs, keep the cat and mouse like 2-on-1 between them. He's supposed to be able to do that. He's supposed to be able to sweep the back line and make game-changing plays there. What's the sell defensively?
I think you nailed it. He's someone who can again, yeah, defend the rim. He's an aggressive deterrent. He's somebody who's capable of just leaping, using his verticality very well. Like you mentioned, sweeping the back line. He's somebody who follows in the guards who are driving in very well and keeps close to them.
He matches steps, yeah.
He does, yeah, and I think that's, if you're drafting Missy, it's going to be for his defense, specifically his rim protection, and his rebounding is excellent too. You want to see the numbers get higher based on his archetype, but he's someone who can just vacuum up
Ooh,
the
I
nearby.
have a good question.
Yeah.
Who'd you like better as a prospect, Missy or Koloko?
Ooh, good question. I think I had Koloko in the low 30s in his draft,
Which is where he went?
which is where he went, and I think I would probably put Missy in the same spot in this class. Koloko was in a better class, so I think,
And he was older.
and he was older. Looking at the age and what they both provide, I might prefer Missy, but it's a very slight edge. I think Koloko was a bit more aware defensively, and I think he was a more refined defensively coming in compared to Missy.
He has
I
good
think that
feet.
he does,
Yeah.
and Missy's footwork is pretty decent as well. But Koloko is somebody who was, again, you're both players you're drafting for their defense. Koloko is somebody who made a lot of sense at his pick in that draft, and that's where I could go either way. I think
Mhm.
that they're both very similar in what they provide. You're both drafting both for the defense. They both have similar offensive concerns. I think Koloko's. Do you have his wingspan offhand? I know it was like
Koloko's
7.
definitely bigger.
Yeah, I
I
think
think
I would.
I think he was 7'1", 7'4" were his
Yeah,
measurables, which is
I,
that's bigger.
yeah. So if you're talking like, if you want a younger player, then I think Missy would make sense. If you want the physical measurements and a bit better defensive awareness, I think Koloko would make sense. I would probably lean Koloko when laying it out like that, but I think they're very close as prospects.
All this does is make me like sad about Tristan. That's
Yeah,
I think he was en route to like probably he definitely could have punched up towards like top 25, top 20 impact from his class. Yeah. But yeah, Missy, interesting. Probably I agree with you. I think more of a guy I'd consider at 31 than I would at 19. However, I've seen comments, I've seen fans who definitely really like him at 19. So I guess we'll see. Onto a guy we've talked about, like a little bit of that dribble creation from the big position, multifaceted skill sets. Kyle Filipowski, for the people wondering, 36 games played this year, 36 minutes per game, 19.4 points, 3.3 assists, 1.8 blocks, 1.3 steals, the Scotty Barnes type stock numbers, 9.8 rebounds per game, 50% from the field, which for a college big is not crazy, 35% from three, and 67% from the line. Kyle Filipowski, 7 feet, big man out of Duke, 20 years old. What's the pitch?
The pitch is, again, multifaceted skill set. I think when you're looking at bigs who can, he gets called a dribble pass shoot big, which I think he needs to improve at all three of those things if he wants to have a lasting career in the NBA.
That
But
is kind of a funny thing is what happens with prospects because people want to be able to tie it in a bow. They'll
mhm,
just elevate a guy's skill set and be like, he does this. But a lot of times they don't end up doing those things, you know?
yeah, and I think I've I kind of made the comparison a few times in my article about Filipowski, where I thought he and Olenek were very similar, just based on what they both provide. Olenek, I think, is more disciplined defensively, but in that same frame, I think is what people can expect his role to be in the NBA, where you're a big who keeps the ball moving. You can take a couple threes per game. He has uh, a pretty good handle, like for his position and his size and where you are in the draft. I think you're pretty happy with how he can put the ball on the floor. He's not a centerpiece player by any means, but he's somebody who, if you need something quick and the play's gone to shit, you can look at going to him and he can maybe make something come out of thin air. But his, like I said, he needs to improve at all three of those aspects: dribble, pass, shoot. Even if he has the foundations in place, just to make sure that he can last. Because
Mhm.
coming in as he is now, there are still cracks in pretty much everything he's got. To a point where if he doesn't improve very much, it could be a short career for him.
That's what I wonder about with Filipowski is like, what's his foothold? What keeps you there? Because in the NBA, a lot of times people want to think about like, okay, well, I don't see that many weaknesses, but I think it's more important to have strengths that create responses, strengths that engender certain things from your opposition. And when you don't have a strength, a lot of times you don't get to impact or create change on the court. And Filipowski, I'm not sure it's exactly intuitive what that will be. It could be a couple things. It could be nothing. What do you make of his ability to like bump and grind to try and like exist as a big man while he's trying to find the foothold with either the dribble, the passing, the shooting? How do you feel about him as like a gritty player?
I think gritty is a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
He's got more of a rep as a dirty player,
Yeah.
and I think
Duke.
Duke. You gotta love the Duke players, man. It's I don't know what they're putting the water out in Durham, but it's making for some real enforcers, I guess. And I wrote about how I think it would be kind of cool. I know, people have their problems with dirty players, but the Raptors haven't really had an enforcer in a while. I mean, the closest maybe you could say is Ibaka back when he had his attitude
Ibaka.
problems.
Kyle is like the perfect asshole all the
Yeah,
time. Yeah.
and like, but somebody who just can do the dirty work. I'm not advocating for them to take somebody who just comes in and starts injuring people, but I think that if you have a real hard ass who comes in and is just annoying for the other team, that could be a selling point for them. But
That happens a
it's
lot. Is there'll be if you have a talented core and then suddenly you draft like the asshole guy who wheel greases all the time, that guy's plus minus starts going through the roof because he's like, all the worst stuff on the floor, I'll do it. Like he'll clean up other messes all the time in one way or another. I wonder, yeah, I when I watch him, I like, I wonder how this guy fits in, and I wonder if he's like the elbow grease type of guy to make it work until he knows.
And I could see that being the case, just because, like you mentioned, how he needs to find his sticking point. So if he comes in and is just this gritty pain in the ass who does a bunch of little things, like I mentioned his passing, which I think is one of the higher. I think his passing is probably a higher selling point than his dribble or his shot at this point. Um, Somebody who can just be a hub and play make from that point, and he can develop his other skills from there. That's where I think that Filipowski can kind of get his foothold and then focus on developing the rest of his game from there. Because I think that if he just comes in as he is and struggles to develop or develop slowly, then yeah, it's going to be tough finding a sticking point for him.
Yeah. I wonder, yeah, I wonder how that works because something needs to give, and I wonder what that looks like. But yeah, very very interesting. As far as like defense, because we've been talking about like mostly offense, Filipowski defensively, as we discussed with Missy, as we discussed with Holmes, like what do you think is the difference between him stepping out on the screen or him playing the two-man game, backpedaling in the lane? Like, where do you think his impact is defensively?
The issue with him is that he's kind of a. We talked about how Holmes is kind of a tweener 4-5, and I think Filipowski is a tweener 4-5. But where Holmes, that's a benefit. I think with
Yeah.
Filipowski, it's a bit of a detract, just because of he doesn't have the defensive acumen as a player like Missy or Holmes. He's got a negative wingspan, which I think is going to be tough for even a 7-footer to put him as like a if you want him as a rim protector. He's not very agile at moving his feet on the perimeter and sticking with perimeter defenders, which I think will be tough. But I mean, Duke managed to use him as kind of somebody who was an anchor.
Hmm.
He wasn't like the key to their defense by any means, but he was somebody who was important to them, and like his advanced defensive stats I think were actually quite impressive considering his defensive reputation. But his yeah, it's just on the film alone. I think it's going to be tough for him at the next level if you don't know if he's a 4 or a 5. I think you kind of need to make him a 5 just due to his lack of agility on the perimeter. But then again, that's where the lack of wingspan comes into play, and I think
Hmm.
defending the rim, he's not going to be a fantastic option. But maybe he can again find a spot being the dirty player.
Well,
We'll see.
that's the interesting aspect, right? Because when you don't have wingspan, you hope to have like a significant amount of agility, so where you can show up places quicker, so your arms don't have to get there. And if you don't have, that necessarily, if you're the low man, you want to have like significant vertical pop so you can go meet guys. He doesn't have that either. The most sensible way, and this is even tough, is to be like a guy who's really strong, and as guys go up, they feel the clean legal contact you give them that kind of saps your burst. And even those guys who are like burst sappers, that's like the Jokic thing, Steven Adams thing. It's like sap the burst when guys go up. But those guys are huge.
They
And
just have
Filipowski,
massive bodies. Yeah.
yeah. And Filipowski maybe is not there. Um, just based on the conversation, it seems like we're coming away maybe pretty low on Filipowski. Is there anything you want to say about him before we move on to, I guess, the last three guys?
I think the idea of Filipowski is really fun. Just if he can figure out the dribble pass shoot, I think he has a long career ahead of him. Just because bigs who can do all three of those things are fairly rare. And yeah, the defense is a concern. I think he can. He gives a damn, which I'll give to him.
Hmm.
He tries. He has effort. He's just not there defensively. And so, would I love the pick at 19? No, I think there's going to be better options available. Would I hate it? Not really, just because I think that again, I see the vision. and I think he's fun. But you're pretty much just looking at the offensive development there, because I think defensively he's probably going to be a liability. You're going to have to find a way to hide him. But yeah, I'm probably middle of the road on him. I think I have him in my mid to late 20s on my board.
Yeah.
So I'd still consider him if we had another first round pick in that 20s range.
Like the 28th pick, perhaps, that got traded.
The, yeah, something like that. It
Yeah.
would be
The
it would be a name I'd consider there.
the Olynyk thing is kind of interesting because while Filipowski has like big, nice numbers at the college level, Olynyk stayed longer as that burgeoning like dribble pass shoot big who had a lot of interesting things. Olynyk kept going back to school to like cement the skill set so that he kind of knew where he was coming into the league. And even he had a little bit of trouble like finding that footing in a league that wasn't exactly sure where to place him. And that's kind of the big interesting thing about Filipowski is you could see it going south. Three guys that have gotten quite a bit of play from myself, Trey, and Josh. Obviously, myself and Trey, both of us, neither of us watch as much as you or Josh do, but Josh was kind enough to lend his expertise on Devin Carter, Jared McCain, and Zach Edey. Since we've talked about those guys quite a bit on the podcast, you've written about them. I can recommend people before the draft go read all of Brendan's, the write-ups on all these different players, but in the order of preference, Devin Carter, McCain, Edey, what's your 1, 2, 3 there for the Raptors anyway?
I can give you their exact positions on my big board. Hang on.
Ooh,
So
actually, give us give us those three, and then I want to hear your top 14.
okay, sure.
Yeah.
So Jared McCain would be my first choice. I think the shooting and overall guard play is just fantastic from him, and that's what
He's good.
ideally what I'd want in Toronto.
And he can sprint into a three. Ooh, he can really sprint into a three.
Yeah, just the movement, shooting, and the off the dribble, like everything about his shooting. I would probably put him like just below Reed Shepherd for the best shooter in the class,
Mm-hmm.
and so I have him at sixth on my board, which is I know a lot higher than a lot of people have Jared McCain, but I
It
just
is,
think
yeah.
I think he's so good. And in a class like this, I'm taking the sure he's going to be an excellent shooter. He's going to be a fantastic option at the guard spot. Devin Carter is somebody who I have a little bit of skepticism about the shooting being more on that high level,
Sure.
but I think the defense is fantastic. He has that incredibly long wingspan. And I think that looking at around the league at these defensive guards, Derek White, Drew Holiday, he's kind of drawn comparisons to those guys. He's going to be valuable for the team that takes him. I have him at 11th on my board.
If
And
everyone keeps saying how bad this draft is, and you can get a guard who now comps are dirty and gross and like comps are never good, basically. But if you get anywhere close to approximating Derek White or Drew Holiday from Devin Carter, like the ball isn't just out of like the field of play, like it's left the park.
oh yeah,
That's home run, home run, home run. Yeah.
if it all comes together for him, like we could be looking back and being like, how did this guy not go top five just
Yeah.
based on his abilities? And who else did we have? Zach Edey.
Yep.
I probably did the biggest 180 on Zach Edey compared to where I was on him last year, because he was kind of a name last year before he decided to go
Yep.
back to Purdue. And last year I had him as like he's a fun second round or undrafted guy. And
His
this
feet
year
got better. His
he
hips
got
got better. Yeah.
he improved in a lot of the concerns that I had about him. Now, I still think he's pretty slow in plotting, and I think that that'll be an issue for him when
Mhm.
confronted with NBA speeds. I have him at 21, 22 on my big board. I'm still working through my late
Right.
first round just because this draft is so weird. But I have him in that early 20s range, and I think that he's going to be a player who can. I think he's just going to have a long career just based on the uniqueness of his size and the fact that he can. He's going to be a guaranteed couple buckets a night, just due to his post play, his touch, and his just domineering presence that he has in the paint on both ends of the court. So I think that a team, taking him in the 20s, if you want somebody who's going to stick around and say, hey, we got this guy who's going to have a multi-year career with our pick. I think I wrote that he's a yeah, why not player.
I feel
And
very similarly. Like I think he plays in the NBA. I think he wins NBA minutes. I think sometimes he gets played off the floor versus certain matchups. I think he'll have every chance over the course of what I think will be a meaningfully long career to try and respond to those weaknesses and overcome them. Maybe he does, but I think like he's going to play NBA minutes. He's going to do well. And at 19, that's not a bad thing. However, you can go higher. What I'm sensing from this is that if there is that trade that all Raptors fans are like obsessing about, where perhaps they take on a nasty contract from Sacramento or something to move up, if we're at the back end of the lottery and either McCain or Carter is available, you're smashing the trade up button, it sounds like.
I would, if
Yeah.
it doesn't require giving up too much. Which I mean, in this class, I don't think it would. I would be surprised if higher picks are fetching a really high price. But yeah, Carter or McCain would be, if you can secure either one of them, um, that would be my preferred choice of attack right now, for sure.
I like both those guys. Carter,
Yeah.
I think I do like better. And maybe I'm coming away a little bit more, maybe a little bit higher on Carter's shooting and maybe a little bit lower on McCain's handle. But
hmm
you can see those two things flipping like easily, you know?
That's totally fair. And like, I have concerns with McCain defensively, just due to like, he's one of those players again where we talked about with Filipowski. They teach him to play with effort at Duke, and he does play with effort, but the size and the shorter wingspan is going to be a problem. Whereas with Carter, no, he's going to be impactful defensively from day one, and I can totally see his shot panning out much better than where I have it right now. And that's just kind of a more of a minor concern with him. I think Carter, for me, the reason why he's not solidly in that top 7 8 is just due to, he is an older prospect,
Hmm.
and the shooting kind of came out of nowhere almost, and you have to wonder if it's legit. And I do think that he's at that point where he can be a couple threes a game on mid 30s efficiency. I don't think he's going to be shooting 40s on a lot of attempts, but
Yeah.
again, I could be wrong. That's just,
McCain could be that though.
McCain could easily be that.
Yeah.
And that's just where I'm coming away from watching both players' films at this point. I would be ecstatic coming away from the draft with either one.
Yeah. McCain in particular, just watching him is, I'm not super sold on like creation from him. Although if it happens, it happens. But a guy who shoots as well as he does, and a guy who was as accomplished and competent attacking closeouts as he was, I'm just like, how does that guy not get play somewhere? And he gives a shit defensively, right? Now
Yeah,
there are limitations, but there's just a lot of things working in the right direction for McCain to be an NBA guard and a good one. And even if there's some limitations defensively, I think the offensive stuff will just be like, teams will figure out how to keep that guy on the floor.
it's something that elevates them, and
Yeah.
we see it all the time with those guards that are just elite offensively. And even if they have some defensive concerns, you want them on the floor just due to the impact they provide on the other end.
Bryn Forbes and Patty Mills, there's a lot of minutes between those guys, and that's like McCain is bigger,
Yeah,
and like those are two extremely good shooters. Probably Bryn Forbes is the best shooter there, but obviously he's very small, and there was no creation, and there's like no in between game. And McCain is bigger than Mills and projects to be like a better finisher at the rim than Mills, and should be in the same like kind of sphere as a shooter. That would be cool to
yeah,
see. But okay, McCain, Carter, Edey should be interesting. Anything else you want to say about this class before we get out of here?
yeah. Did we want to talk about my top 14?
Yes. Oh, yes,
Yeah,
yes. Go ahead.
we'll cover that real quick. Okay, number one, and I don't think it's close, is Reed Shepard from Kentucky. I just think that the shooting is, we haven't really seen a guard shoot like him since Steph Curry or Trey Young.
His
So
numbers are crazy.
It is actually insane, the volume and efficiency that he has. I know people are like, oh, the off the dribble numbers, which are still high, and it's not like he
What
doesn't.
do you have those offhand? Or do you
Uh,
remember the ballpark that it was existing in?
it was still around the 50s. It was just like a lower volume compared to like Rob Dillingham.
Jeez.
But it's Reed Shepherd is just my far and away number one at this point. I did kind of have him in a similar tier with my number two prospect, Alex Sarr. But I think that Reed's just, the more I've watched between the two of them, I just have less concerns with Reed at the next level. And like defensively, he's, even being a smaller guard, he's just somebody who is just a shutdown presence on the perimeter. And I think that he's going to have no problem, even with his smaller size at the NBA level, just due to his IQ and positioning and every good little thing that you want a guard to be doing on defense. But yeah, Reed Shepherd, Alex Sarr. I have Sarr and Klingon. Klingon's number 3. I have them pretty close. I think that if you're looking for more perimeter-oriented big, who you think can maybe develop a handle and become more impactful offensively, Sarr is your guy. If you want someone who can be that just dominant rim-protecting presence, Klingon makes a lot of sense. I really like Klingon's playmaking, hub passing ability. So that boosts him pretty high for me. Number 4, Zachary Rissichet. Bad with French names, my apologies. And number 5, Dalton Connect. Those two are kind of hard. Rissichet is an excellent shooter. He had that stretch kind of, I don't want to say like February to March, where he was struggling. And that kind of damaged his stock for me a little bit, but taking it as a macro perspective, I think he's going to be pretty successful. I'm not too big on his creation ability like I am Dalton Connect, but I do think that being a 6'9" athlete who can space the floor, that's obviously very appealing, especially being 4 years younger than Connect. Number 6, we touched on Jared McCain. Number 7, Ron Holland from G League Ignite. I was low on Holland all year. And then when I started to look at this class as a whole, I'm thinking, all right, well, you got this insane athlete, awesome defender. The shooting's a concern, yes, but I think that he has the ability to be impactful at generating rim pressure, doing a lot of athletic forward things. And he's at the point where I'm like, yeah, if you're at the 7, 8, 9, 10 kind of pick range and you need to look at a forward, for example, like I would probably swing for his upside over someone like my next forwards after him down the list a bit are Bezalis and Da Silva. Mm-hmm. So I would take the upside play there. Ron Holland at 7. Number 8, Nikola Topic. His injuries are recent, and I think that's a pretty big concern. But big guard, excellent playmaker, very quick and crafty. Another player with a concerning shot, but I think with a bigger guard like that who can
a lot of craft,
finesse his way to the rim, that's something you also got to take a hard look at. I may end up lowering him a bit depending on how severe these injuries are, considering I have another kind of wing guard behind him in Stefan Castle at number 9. And the more I'm looking at this, there's a lot of players with questionable shots in this class.
That's what Josh had said, that when a player shoots good in this class, you question their defense, and when somebody defends well, you question their shot in this class.
And that's the case with Castle. I think he's an excellent defender. The shot is, I know a lot of people, especially after the tournament, have kind of put him in that top 5, but I am still a little wary about his shot and kind of what his role is going to be, because I know he's drawn comparisons to like Anthony Black last year. And I liked Black more as a prospect because I think he was more impactful defensively, and I think he was a bit better as an advantage creator. Castle is in that same archetype of being a bigger wing guard who can step up and play make if you need him to. But that, yeah, the shot is concerning, and I don't think he's as far along defensively as Black was, and that's something I had to take into consideration.
Hmm.
Number 10, I have DaRon Holmes, and I think that, yeah, again, we talked about Holmes at length, and I think if you're just looking for a big who can do a lot of things, only 21 years old, so he's not a super old prospect, but he can come in right away and start making a difference for you. 11, Devin Carter. We talked about him a lot too. Number 12 is Jacoby Walter. I think for what were my notes on him here? I just want to pull them
That
up real
opening
quick.
game was pretty nuts for him.
Yeah, it was like, and that was something where I was like, man, maybe this guy, like, are we looking at a top 5 guy? And I
Hmm.
did have him in that top 5, 6, 7 range at the start of the year. Um, as the season went on, you start to see his deficiencies develop a little bit more. Like with his shooting efficiency went down.
Hmm.
His burst is a little questionable. His He's not like the longest player. I think he's like a 6'4". You might want him to maybe step into more of a point guard role, even though right now he's probably more suited for a combo guard. But he's a fun watch, and he's one of those guards where kind of like, I'm not comparing him to Anthony Edwards, but one of those guards where the numbers don't jump off the page at you in terms of efficiency, but he has all those skill sets where like he's a physical driver. He's someone who can create off the dribble. He has the defensive intensity to be impactful, and so he's going to be a solid player on both ends. But you're just not sure, just because the production wasn't really where it needed to be. But if you're looking for like a shot creating scoring guard who is just, again, he was really fun to watch, and so that's where I'm putting him at 12 over the likes of someone like, I have Rob Dillingham at 13,
Mm.
and Rob, I know, has a lot of fans. I've seen a lot of Raptors fans wanting him back when we had our lottery pick, and I think Dillingham is a step below Walter because, yes, while Dillingham is a bit more, I think, polished as a creator, as an off-ball shooter, or sorry, off the dribble shooter, and just general, yeah, shot creation. His size is something that I think is concerning when he's 6'1", 6'2", and 160 pounds. I think I'm curious to see how he can stay on the floor defensively when he's that light.
Hmm.
But I mean, his offensive game is excellent. I obviously like his teammate Reed Shepherd a lot more, but I think when you're in the lottery and you need an upside play, Dillingham could be that. And with my last spot in the lottery at number 14, I flip back and forth between Bazelis and Da Silva. Bazelis, again, this kind of comes down to more if you want to make the upside play or if you want a player who can come in and do a lot of things and be a ready contributor. Da Silva being in the latter category, and I wrote about him on Raptors Republic as well.
I like De Silva quite a bit. I
He's
think there's a
my
lot to like.
Oh yeah, he's my pick if the Raptors want to go for a forward at 19. I think that he makes the most sense at that position. I like him more than his teammate Cody Williams, who I think Cody's more of the popular lottery name, but I think Da Silva just has so much to like. And like Holmes, like Shepherd, a lot of my players that I'm high on have those multifaceted skills. Da Silva does excellent things on defense. He's a great passer, solid shooter. His numbers are consistent across the past 2 years. I don't think he hardly ever deviated from his averages. And when asked to put the ball in his hands a lot more, his efficiency didn't drop. So he's just ready to come in and be that steadying presence, which I think is important, especially if you're in the back half of the lottery. Maybe you're like a fringe playoff team and you just need somebody to come in and be a contributor. Da Silva, I think, can be that. Bazelis. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, but everybody who listens to this podcast heard me say it a million times, but plays at multiple speeds, which
Yeah.
is really impressive for a guy who keeps a live dribble. It opens up more, and especially in a bigger NBA floor, playing at multiple speeds is something that can translate immediately from college to the NBA. So finding that comfortability in the middle of the floor like he has with a live dribble, he could have even more room kind of attacking closeouts, making decisions going downhill. So that's something that could actually pop at the NBA level, I think, or I wonder about. But yeah, anyway.
And you're right. Like that's why I'm go back and forth between him and Bazelis at that last lottery spot, because Bazelis is more of this point forward upside play who, like, I see so badly the player that he wants to be. It's just the product on the court isn't there. The shooting is like 27% on 3 attempts a game. So like he had this rep coming in of being, oh, he's going to be this shooting forward, and he just wasn't that. I like his touch at the least. I think he's capable of turning into a good shooter. It's just about finding the right fit for him. I think Detroit's probably got the most buzz for him right now, so I'd be curious to see how he plays alongside Cade.
Would be interesting, he and Asar, like,
yeah. Well, I think that, like,
and Jaden too. That is like a hodgepodge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and I think Detroit really needs to hit on a player who becomes a positive shooter, because Asar, Ivy, even Cade before recently struggled with their shot, and I think that's a big reason why Detroit hasn't taken that next step yet, is because they don't have a lot of spacing around Cade. So if Bazelis comes in and he's one of those guys who's like, yeah, this past season was a fluke, I'm actually a shooter, big surprise everybody, then that could be huge, and I think people would be like, yeah, obvious top 5 pick in retrospect. The lack of identity with what he is why I don't have him a lot higher. Like I said, I see the vision. I think if you want him to be a point forward who can shoot, I think he's a solid defender. He averaged like 2 blocks a game on a team with Ron Holland and Tyler Smith and Izan Almanza, and so that's pretty impressive. But yeah, just a lot of little pieces here and there where you think, okay, if this all comes together, this could be a great player. If it doesn't, he could be out of the league by his second contract. But that's somebody who, if you're picking in the lottery, you might want to take that swing.
Interesting. Brendan, you've given us an hour and 10 minutes of your time. Is there anything you want to say to the listeners before we get out of here?
This class, it may not be the most exciting class. It may not be the most talent driven. There are exciting players in a lot of places, and I think that if you sit down and read through some names, then you're more than likely going to come away with someone who you're a fan of. So I would recommend anybody who isn't really familiar with this class to, shameless plug, read my reports, read a lot of other reports by other draft creators out there, and you're bound to find your guy. And just take a long hard look at this class, because there's going to be diamonds in the rough.
And I'll say, there's always so much variance between what people believe and think in a draft. It's a crapshoot. So if you want to learn about the draft, a great place to go is Brendan's write-ups, where there's not only all the relevant data that, as people kind of like do highlight scouting, you can see also that Brendan has clipped like relevant plays and more unique plays that might not show up in like a highlight package and stuff like that. So even if you disagree about where a player is going to end up, which is, I think people oftentimes get like upset or mad about mock drafts. It's like, oh, this guy's not going 21, he's going 27. The differences are pretty negligible. You just want to know more about the players. Brendan's write-ups, I think, are chock full of insights and thoughts, that's all anybody's really trying to do. It's really hard to just like get the draft right. Like, I don't know who's stepping into a draft and being like, actually, these will be the 10 best players. And you just want people who are able to kind of like share insights, I think.
You meet a few people like that in draft circles. Yeah. Guys who are just like, these are the guys. Yeah. I'm not claiming to be that. I'm just saying this is what I see, and this is how I think it'll translate, and that's my analysis. You can agree, you can disagree. This is what I see.
But I think that's like a great place to be. That's why I try and write the way I write, and that's why I do like those deep dives. Is like I'm trying to create objective measures that most people don't really get to see and don't get to see put to words or data. Is like these are some unique objective measures that we don't get to see very often. Here's some other objective stuff. All this is objective. Now here's what I think a little bit at the end about how this projects and stuff like that. But it's just giving people the known, because the
Yeah,
known oftentimes can be obfuscated, I think,
yeah,
which
and
is
you can get a really different picture from just watching highlights or just reading,
mhm.
somebody's hype piece about a player than what that player actually is. So that's why I think it's important to look at, like you said, the objective and then the opinion of how that objective could work out.
Yep.
So yeah, something to keep in mind for people looking to get into the draft.
French wings. Those are the highlight scouting. Everyone has opinion on like 7 French wings at any point in time, and all of it is based. Well, like 98% of it is based off of like a 4-minute YouTube video. It's awesome. Brendan, thank you so much not only for the work you provide at Raptors Republic, but for hopping on with me. Listener, thank you for tuning in. I'm not sure if this is the last draft podcast before the draft. Maybe it will be, maybe it won't. If I'm back, I guess you'll know it isn't. Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, listener. And whether you got into this, listener, video person, in the morning or at night, have a blessed day and goodbye.